Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort has captured the imagination of the country and captivated the press. But it's also raised issues about his political leadership and his political thinking. In part 2, in an exclusive interview with one of India's top political thinkers, Pratap Bhanu Mehta, I shall discuss the new image of the Prime Minister that emerges, as well as some of the signs that we ought to be very careful of. But first, the calling off of the Foreign Secretary level talks with Pakistan, because the Pakistan High Commissioner has met Kashmiri separatists. Was this an understandable response by the Indian government, or an overreaction, possibly under pressure from the media? That's the first discussion tonight. And now joining me to discuss the cancellation of the Foreign Secretary level talks with Pakistan is former Congress Minister and Congress MP Mani Shankar Iyer, BJP spokesperson Lalita Kumaramangalam, Pakistan's former High Commissioner to India Ashraf Jahangir Qazi, and India's former High Commissioner to Pakistan Satyabrat Pal. But first, joining me on the telephone, the official spokesman of the Government of India, Syed Akbaruddin. Mr. Akbaruddin, why have these talks been called off?
Let me try and put this in perspective. And that is, the genesis of this round of diplomatic engagement can be traced back to Prime Minister Modi's initiative on his very first day in office. Subsequent to that, the two Prime Ministers agreed that the two Foreign Secretaries will be in touch to move the process forward. It was the Indian Foreign Secretary who called the Pakistani Foreign Secretary and began the process of saying, let's meet. It was the Indian Foreign Secretary who then agreed to the Pakistani Foreign Secretary's request to visit Pakistan, although we had invited the Pakistani Foreign Secretary to come to India. However, we didn't want to quibble on that, and she agreed to the invitation of the Pakistani Foreign Secretary to meet. Also, we had agreed very quickly on the date. Now, all these steps are clear indications that we were interested in constructive diplomatic engagement. Yet, what we saw in the last few days was, to us, a clear and unambiguous attempt to interfere in India's internal affairs. So this afternoon, the Indian Foreign Secretary called the Pakistani High Commissioner and made it very clear to him in unambiguous and clear terms that if they would like constructive diplomatic engagement with India, then meetings with the so-called Hurraiyat leaders undermine that process.
Can I come in at that point? You're saying to me that, in fact, before the talks were called off, our Foreign Secretary rang the Pakistan High Commissioner and made it clear that if he went ahead with meetings with the Kashmiri separatists, the talks wouldn't happen. In other words, he'd been clearly told that if the talks with the separatists happened, India would call off the Foreign Secretary level talks. Is that a correct reading of what you just said to me?
Absolutely correct. In advance of his meeting, this was clearly conveyed to him, and after that, we waited for Mr. Shabir Shah to come out, and only then decided that despite our requests, since Pakistan felt that their engagement with the Hurraiyat separatists, who we consider as separatists, perhaps has a greater salience for them, and then we announced the calling of the talks, because we feel that no useful purpose will be served at this stage.
In other words, you gave the Pakistan High Commissioner clear warning, he didn't heed your warning, and therefore you called off the talks.
You're right. We explained to him that it would not be possible to continue the talks if the meetings went ahead.
Did the ceasefire violations that have taken place so far this year, and in particular in this month, August, also play a part in calling off the talks, or did that have no role to play at all?
Karan, you are aware of Prime Minister's views on this, that diplomatic constructive engagement requires a conducive atmosphere. Yet we were restrained. When there were these sort of ceasefire violations, we were restrained. After that, Pakistan then referred to Jammu and Kashmir, we were restrained. There was no comment from our side. Subsequently, even today, even when these talks with the Hurraiyat were coming out, we were restrained, we kept quiet, but we were engaged diplomatically with Pakistan. Yet, they decided to opt for the path that they chose.
All right, Mr. Akbaruddin, you're making it clear that the ceasefire violations may have been in the background, but the critical tipping point was the Pakistan High Commissioner's decision to go ahead with talks with separatists, even though you had forewarned him that if he did, the Foreign Secretary level talks wouldn't happen. Thank you very much for joining us and making that clear. Mani Shankar Iyer, let's begin our discussion and let's start with you. Do you accept that the Indian government had good reasons to call off the talks, or do you believe that the Indian government has A, overreacted and B, possibly blundered as well? Which of the two is your answer?
They've overreacted, blundered, and it's a childish reaction. In the past, there have been several encounters between not the so-called Hurraiyat, but the Hurraiyat, and Pakistani dignitaries, including their foreign minister, and we have not made that a casus belli. And in case Mr. Modi was intending to call off the talks if there's any connection with the Kashmiri Hurraiyat, then he should have made that clear to Mr. Nawaz Sharif back in May. Indeed, Nawaz Sharif has come under considerable criticism in Pakistan for not having met the Hurraiyat on the occasion that he visited here in the month of May. And I think diplomats are required to meet all shades of opinion. I served in Pakistan in Ziaul Haq's time. I met with Ghasbakhsh Bezenjo. I met with Ahmad Nawaz Bukti. I met with Akbar Bukti. I met with Benazir Bhutto. I met with Ghulam Muhammad Shah. I mean, whom did I not meet with? And always under the eye of their secret service. So, if even in Ziaul Haq's time, diplomats were permitted, Indian diplomats, to meet with people to discover what is a larger Pakistani perspective on India-Pakistan relations and on internal issues in Pakistan, then I think we are not being in line with the kind of treatment we've always given to diplomats, which is to allow them to interact with different shades of political opinion in our country.
Lalita Kumaramangalam, the official reasons given earlier this evening by Mr. Akbaruddin for calling off the talks is because Pakistan's sincerity is now in question because their ambassador met the Hurraiyat, and secondly because India believes that this is interference in its internal affairs. But have you forgotten that almost every time Pakistan foreign secretaries or Pakistan foreign ministers have visited this country, they've met Hurraiyat? Hina Rabbani Khan did, Sartaj Aziz did. In your time when General Musharraf came for the Agra talks, he met with Hurraiyat. So why suddenly do you object if the Pakistan High Commissioner meets with Hurraiyat?
Karan, firstly I'd like to say that, history can't keep repeating itself on and on and on and expect the Indians to always remain tolerant and to actually look at more, give more precedence to the Pakistani viewpoint than on our own. Our government, current government, has made it very clear that the interests of our country and our people will always come first. We have tolerated a lot of stuff from them since May 26th. And as Syed Akbaruddin made it very clear, this is the last straw on the camel's back. Now, what happened in the past happened, and yes, we have been endlessly tolerant, regardless of which government was in power. But I think sometimes one has to put a full stop to certain things. We have not said that that dialogue has been broken off forever. We have said that given the current situation, it looks like the point of the visit of the Foreign Secretary, Indian Foreign Secretary, it seems quite futile. As Mr. Akbaruddin explained to you in some detail, we have tried to understand Pakistan's point of view.
Don't repeat what Akbaruddin has said. We have limited time, Lalita Kumaramangalam. Don't repeat what Akbaruddin has said. We don't need a repetition. I'm going to stop you. I don't want you to repeat what Akbaruddin has said. I'm going to go across to Ashraf Jahangir Qazi. Mr. Qazi, you're a former High Commissioner to India. You understand the nature of the sometimes brittle, sometimes friendly relations between the two countries probably better than most. Given that Syed Akbaruddin has made it clear that your High Commissioner in Delhi was forewarned by our Foreign Secretary that if you go ahead with talks with the Hurraiyat, then the talks between the two Foreign Secretaries will be called off. Was he wise to have gone ahead with those talks? Do you think he made a blunder at his own level, for which he himself is accountable, or do you think he went ahead with those talks after consulting Islamabad and therefore this was a decision taken by your government?
Well, I'm not part of the government anymore, Karan, and I can only speak on behalf of my experience of India-Pakistan relations and what little I might still know about it. I think it's very unfortunate that this has happened, and I don't want to go into the minutiae, but when I was High Commissioner, as well as during the time of my predecessors and successors, we regularly met with the APHC leaders with the knowledge of the Indian government, Indian MEA, and when I was there, the BJP was in office. They never objected to this, and of course I know in principle they don't support it and have raised these issues, but as you said in your own introductory remarks, when President Musharraf came, and more recently when Sartaj and foreign ministers have come, they have met, not necessarily with the blessings, but they know it's consistent with our position on Kashmir, over which we have differences. Okay. And I think the expectation in Pakistan, if I may just complete what I'm trying to say, is that with the coming in of both new governments, Nawaz Sharif in Pakistan and Mr. Modi in India, there was a real expectation, or still is, of turning a new page with regard to old issues and to find a way forward. Sure. And this, and therefore requiring one party to behave in a manner inconsistent with its known position, I think is unfortunate. Okay. Because we've really got to try and see how we can move from a non-zero approach, a zero-sum approach to a non-zero-sum approach on these very difficult issues.
Absolutely. I want to put that to you. You heard Ashraf Qazi say that he was here when the BJP was in power. Mr. Vajpayee was Prime Minister. And Ashraf Qazi would frequently meet the Hurraiyat. Several subsequent High Commissioners, including the last High Commissioner, met the Hurraiyat. No Indian government really complained, although we didn't like it. Now, suddenly for Mr. Modi to make this a breaking point, without forewarning the Pakistanis that he changed his attitude to their meeting Hurraiyat, surely that is a little unreasonable. Or do you think it's acceptable?
Well, it's unfortunate. But perhaps, I think, there was an expectation here, which was a false expectation, but because Mr. Sharif didn't meet the Hurraiyat when he came, that therefore the Pakistanis would abandon their long-standing position. But I think everyone knows, including the Pakistanis, that the Pakistani High Commissioner goes through these motions. The Pakistani High Commissioner meeting the Hurraiyat before talks is really like the cook consulting the chickens before a banquet. Everyone knows that it's really a sacrifice that will be offered up at the right time. So we really should not have gone off the deep end now. It makes no sense. In
other words, we should have been more understanding and more accepting of the compulsions the Pakistani High Commissioner is under.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, let me put this to you, Ashraf Qazi, before I go back to Manish Shankar. Everyone knew that Mr. Modi had made a tremendous effort to reach out, not just to Mr. Nawaz Sharif, but to all the SAARC leaders when he invited them for his inauguration. Thereafter, there's been very warm exchanges of letters, saris and shawls between the two prime ministers. A certain expectation had built up, and it was underlined by the fact that when Nawaz Sharif came to Delhi in May, he didn't, and pointedly didn't, meet Hurraiyat. Was it then necessary for your High Commissioner to meet Hurraiyat at this point and take the risk of scuppering the talks, particularly after he'd been forewarned by the Foreign Secretary that if you take this step, the talks will be called off?
Well, when Nawaz Sharif visited Delhi for the inauguration, he came specifically for that purpose, and he held talks with the Indian government. And if he did not meet with the Hurraiyat leaders on that occasion, there can be an explanation for that, because he'd come for a very specific purpose, to attend an invitation, and went back. So he saw it in that light. Even so, he came under considerable criticism. That are you suggesting that your position is going to change on this matter? Now, meeting with the Hurraiyat leaders has been consistent with our position, and while the Indians have not agreed with that, they have not made this into a condition for our engagement on this issue through structured dialogue and in other meetings and all. For this to happen right now is very disappointing, and I think this, the High Commissioners regularly meet, and to make this a condition for the Foreign Secretary's visit is quite surprising, and a backward step, and I cannot see the rationale for it.
Let me put this to you very quickly, Lalita Kumara Mangalam. the incredible impression that Mr. Modi created by his overtures to Pakistan has been shattered today. Instead, now Mr. Modi looks as if he's uncertain and doesn't have a clear idea about what to do with Pakistan. In addition, he looks inconsistent. He looks vulnerable to pressure either from the press or from extremists in his own party. And suddenly, a strong man thinking out of the box looks like a weak man who's vulnerable to the last word he hears. This has damaged Mr. Modi.
Not at all, Karan. It seems to have damaged Modi in Pakistan, but you must remember that Mr. Modi is the Prime Minister of India, not Pakistan, and we have always made it very clear that the interests of this own country come first, A, and B, that Kashmir is and always will remain an integral part of India, and C, that any way forward could only be through bilateral dialogue. And especially given the fact that the Foreign Secretary had spoken to the Pakistani High Commissioner, for him to sort of fly in the face of that wind and do exactly what he thought he would, that he could continue to do what's been done in the past, I think it proves that we have been very firm about what we have said. Extending our friendship doesn't mean that we are going to bend over backwards and be taken advantage of.
Manishankar, I want to pick up on that point revealed to us in this program earlier on by Syed Akbaruddin, that the Foreign Secretary had forewarned Mr. Basit that if he went ahead with talks with the separatists, then the Foreign Secretary talks would be called off. Clearly, at that point, Mr. Basit would have referred back to Islamabad, and clearly his instructions from Islamabad would have been go ahead. So do you think that Mr. Nawaz Sharif, because of his domestic pressures at the moment, he's got terrible trouble on the streets of Islamabad with pressure from Qadri and with pressure from Imran Khan, and he's also got problems with the army who perhaps don't agree with his India policy. So do you think Mr. Sharif, in this boxed-in position, would have said to Mr. Basit, sorry, you have to go ahead because domestic compulsions for me are so important? Do you think that's one explanation?
Yeah, if India puts its interests first, then we must expect Pakistan to put its interests first. There has been, I happened to go to Pakistan soon after Nawaz Sharif's visit in May, and I heard that there had been very, very severe criticism of Nawaz Sharif in his National Assembly as well as in the media there for his having broken with the past precedent of meeting with Hurraiyat people when Pakistani leaders visit India. And in these circumstances, for us to have told the Pakistan High Commissioner that if you meet them, we're going to cancel it, was a story that was going to come out. And in Pakistan, it would have been seen and portrayed as an attempt by India to impose conditions on talks that did not have conditions attached to them when the initiative was first broached. So any far-seeing diplomat would have known that the consequence of even mentioning this to Basit would be that we wouldn't be able to have the talks. And since, in my opinion, talks with Pakistan are in India's interest, leave alone Pakistan's interest, and that a viable relationship with Pakistan is probably India's greatest foreign policy need. In these circumstances, I repeat my charge that it is childish to break off the talks on these grounds. And I don't think it's going to be very easy to resume it, because I cannot see any Pakistan government in future agreeing that one of the conditions of the continuation of the talks will be that they can have no touch with the Hurraiyat, especially when Indian diplomats in Pakistan,
you're in danger of repeating yourself. I'm stopping you, Mani. You're repeating yourself. I have limited time, which is why I don't want you to repeat yourself. I want to pick up here on that point about Mr. Modi being a powerful, strong man with a huge mandate. It's unquestioned in India. In the meantime, Mr. Nawaz Sharif is particularly vulnerable at the moment, not just because of Imran Khan and Qadri, but also because his entire approach to India is being questioned by the army. In these circumstances, and given Mr. Nawaz Sharif's vulnerability, could the Indian government not have been a little bit more understanding and a little bit more tolerant of his compulsions?
Yes, I think so, and particularly since, as Mani said, talks are not a gift to Pakistan. Talks are important for India as well. It's through talks that you will try to get rid of the problems that you presently have. So I think you're shooting yourself in the foot by breaking off talks.
There's a second point I want to put to you. Clearly, Mr. Modi would have known that he's stronger at the moment, Nawaz is weaker, that there's a case for being understanding. And if therefore in those circumstances Mr. Modi decided not to be understanding, and to be actually rather rigid and to impose a condition that has not existed up to now, what do you think propelled Mr. Modi to do it? Was it pressure from the domestic press? Was it the fact that he needs to look big in the eyes of the RSS and his own extremists?
I wouldn't be able to speculate on his motives, but certainly this comes across as inconsistent with the initiative that he initially took.
And has it damaged him as well?
Well, that would be again for Mr. Modi's advisors to assess.
Yeah, but you're an independent man.
But certainly, as I said, it makes him look inconsistent.
Which is damaging. Ashok Kazi, let's come briefly to what the future looks. I mean, as things stand, the two prime ministers are supposed to be meeting on the fringes of the United Nations General Assembly at the end of September. Do you think that is likely to go ahead, or is now that entire process in question?
Well, let me just first begin by saying that, not only had I been meeting and my predecessors and successors with the APHC, but the Indian government under various, leaderships, party leaderships, has been permitting the APHC to visit Pakistan. So they, while not approving of these contacts, were aware of what the Pakistani position is and how it saw the APHC, and it didn't insist on Pakistan changing its stance as a condition for negotiations. Now, if we bring to bear a positive attitude towards the negotiations to try and make it forward, we can't insist that the other side takes steps inconsistent with its formal position. And whereas India insists that, Kashmir is, a part of India, very well, every Indian knows that that's not Pakistan's position. And
Mr. Kazi, that's the point you've made already. Come to my question. What does the future look like? And in these circumstances, is it possible for the two prime ministers to meet in September? Or now is the whole process in doubt?
This is a bureaucratic mess up, and I think the political leaders need to be in touch with each other even before they meet on the margins in New York to clear this up and allow the process of preparations for the resumption of the structured dialogue process to begin. I know a lot of confidence building measures will be necessary to build up the necessary trust, but I think in the absence of guidance from the political leadership right from the top, bureaucrats will only operate from the briefs they already have.
Lalita Kumaramangalam, you've heard the former Pakistan High Commissioner to India say that this is a bureaucratic mess up. If there is to be any future improvement in the relationship, if that promised meeting in September in New York between the two prime ministers to go ahead, you need politicians at the very highest, and that's code for Mr. Modi himself, to sort it out. Is Mr. Modi willing to pick up the phone, reach out to Nawaz Sharif and sort out this issue? Because if he doesn't, the excellent initiative he took in May will have literally floundered. So this is really a test point for Mr. Modi.
Karan, let me point out. Karan, let me point out first that it was Mr. Modi who first extended the hand of friendship to the Pakistan when he invited Musharraf here for his swearing in.
No one doubts it. We know
I'd just like to remind them that, confidence building measures, if Pakistan requires it from us, let me also remind all of you that it takes two hands to clap. Both sides have to show some trust and mutual trust in each other, but it also means that both sides should look at the viewpoint of the other country. India cannot always be expected to be bending over to accommodate Pakistan's internal problems.
Right.
Whatever
I'm going to stop you there. I have a former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan with me. I want to put that point to him. Forgive me, I'm stopping you. The point Lalita Kumaramangalam is making is twofold. One, India can't always be bending over backwards to accommodate Pakistan. So the perception is that India does all the bending, Pakistan gets the advantage. A, is that a correct perception? And B, the other point being made is that, in fact, we are the aggrieved party in this instance. We are the ones that have had to put up with bad diplomacy on the part of the Pakistan High Commissioner. Do you agree with that as well?
It's quite clear that we have a problem where each country believes, that the hardliners in each country to believe that if you talk to each other, you are being weak. So the government that wishes to engage in dialogue is portrayed by the hardliners as weak. It certainly is not the case, and it would be extremely, it reflects a lack of self-confidence if you believe that we've always had to bend over backwards. That's certainly not the case.
And are we right in feeling that we're the aggrieved party at the moment?
Well, the government certainly seems to believe so, but
is it right to feel so?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I certainly don't think
Manishankar Rai, very quickly, your party is in the very peculiar position of actually, I imagine, supporting what Mr. Modi has done, because your spokesman were officially questioning the decision of the Pakistan High Commissioner to hold talks with the Hurraiyat. Your views are completely at odds with your party as well. Can you convince your own party that perhaps they should change their view on this issue and that they are wrong in the position they've taken?
Is that not par for the course? I mean, why on earth have you invited me and not a spokesman of the party? It's because you wanted my point of view. I presented my point of view. I think it was inconsistent with Mr. Modi's earlier stand for him to have invited Nawaz Sharif. And now he's just reverting to type.
Okay.
And therefore, to answer the question which you put to Ashraf, which he diplomatically avoided answering, I don't see any prospect of any significant improvement in India-Pakistan relations, even if Nawaz Sharif and Modi happen to meet on the sidelines of the forthcoming.
Very quickly, I'm going to Ashraf Qazi. You have to answer me, Mr. Qazi, literally in one sentence. How has this gone down in Pakistan?
Well, they will see this as a reversal from the very encouraging when the two leaders met in Delhi. And I do think that political leaders can restore this and should restore this.
Okay.
And when we talk about perceptions, you've always got to be aware of perceptions on the other side of the border.
Absolutely. That's a very important message. Both sides have their perceptions. Both sides have their compulsions. Both sides have their vulnerabilities. And a wise, strong Prime Minister would be well advised to, if he has, to bear the other side's problems in mind before he acts and acts rashly. And this time, many people might perhaps conclude that Mr. Modi acted somewhat in haste. But of course, that is my opinion. It is clearly not the government's.